Sam, it's great having the podcast today. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you, Adam?
Good, good. Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. It's great to have you on, and I just thought I'd introduce you and basically start off by kind of talking about like personal development and how you kind of got into personal development and what you do. Because I see like on
hmm
your website, we were saying just a minute ago, you kind of like into coaching people, about mental health and their diets, nutrition, and so forth.
hmm it's something that really has intrigued me. One growing up, I was very
Yeah.
limited in the knowledge that I could have. So I want to make what's kind of made me get interested in trying to share more with individuals about whether it's the nutrition or how to use their bodies. It's it's because I know knowledge is so important, and I want to make sure that other people they have that knowledge accessible to them and in an uncloudy type of way, something very simple, very easy for them to understand or to use.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I think like it's so good to be able to have that kind of knowledge to kind of apply it to your life, isn't it? To kind of learn about how your body works and your mindset and these kind of things. Because I think like especially now, what's been happening in the world,
hmm
there's people need to look after their well-being, in all kind
hmm
of areas because it's all kind of interlinked, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, it. I'm actually very amazed as I continue to study the human body and how our body and our minds are interconnected. Um, just in a physiological, when I was studying for medical assistant, I learned about anatomy and physiology. Physiology is the way your anatomy interacts with your psychology, and it's just so interconnected. And like you said, now there's it's definitely a trying time for a lot of people, especially
Mm.
like I know people who are very extroverted individuals to have to be in isolation. It's definitely posed a different challenge for them.
Mm.
So keeping not just our physical health, our mental health, and learning little tips and little things and sharing that kind of stuff is really important, I think, for most people, just for
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think like, there's a lot of people in different situations where, they're being challenged, mentally and, how they're feeling based on, say, their job situation, their family situation, where they're living.
Mhm,
There's lots of kind of layers to it, isn't there? And I think like you said, it's important to be, kind of applying that right knowledge to your life where you can grow and look after yourself, because I think like if there's stress, then that's going to leak into other areas which
mhm,
are going to make you feel run down, probably more anxious. People might feel more susceptible to eating like junk food and things like this, which kind of all or drinking more more alcohol as well.
mhm. Definitely. Um, and and honestly, something I've learned is, one, though they're like coping mechanisms, which everybody needs to have a coping mechanism. Um, and something that I've learned more recently this year is how interlinked, again, going back to our body, how interlinked it is with our mind. So if we're not
Mm,
taking care of our body, we're not taking care of our gut, we're abusing it, well, it's gonna pour right back into our into the way we
mm,
feel.
mm,
Whether we're eating junk food, well, it kind of starts a cycle, and it's so easy. And myself, I've experienced COVID. Definitely had
yeah.
an effect on me. It's been difficult. And I've seen, I stopped complete like self-care for 3 or 4 weeks
Mm,
last month just because you get to a certain point where you can only take so much self-isolation. You can only take so
mm,
much of all this craziness. And it's it's finding that little reset, that little window, and then hitting the reset button and actually taking the action to do that, which I found for me has helped tremendously with my mental health and my physical well-being as well.
yeah. No, definitely. And I think, like you said, it's like you said, it's that perspective, isn't it? And that self awareness that kind of come into play. That are ultimately like, the kind of the magnifying glass on, on ourselves, looking at, how things are going, how things are
Mhm.
going through us. And I think like, whether that's how you feel, the thoughts that you're thinking, and just kind of keeping track, isn't it? What, how you are and where you're at. And I know that, throughout this period, you can get into like, probably bad habits. You might be sleeping in more, you might be drinking
Mhm.
or eating certain things. And I found out myself, I was drinking, not not loads, but I was drinking like, a few days in a row, having a beer and things like that. And I was like, I don't really need this. You kind of notice that pattern where you're just doing it. And then it's
Mhm.
like, oh, well, I feel like XYZ, so I'm gonna not do that and just have, a drink at the weekend or something like that. You notice the benefits. And I think like it's one of those times where, people might be out to work and they might think, what else do I do? Um, looking at the things that they can't control. And do you think it's like important to, look at the things that you can control and have that kind of perspective on things?
Like, absolutely, I believe, there's something that I'm still working on, about control, and
Yeah.
like, like, we don't have control over anybody else or anything else other than ourselves. The moment that we try and take that step into controlling somebody else's opinion, someone else's view on something, someone else's actions, the second that they don't want to fall in line with it, then all of a sudden we're the ones being affected negatively and hurt by it because we have these expectations that we set that are not being fulfilled. So it's
Mm.
definitely something that I like, and like you mentioned, like with the drinking or like eating bad food or falling out of exercise routine. That's something that I found myself. The lines get blurry with your schedule, with your activities, now, especially since there's a lot of people don't have that set schedule that they had. Get up at this time, go to school or go to work. A lot of people are working from home now. It's actually, I found for myself sitting down writing what is like what there is no exception to me doing in a day or on
Mm.
specific days of the week. And so like working out, it was an issue for me. Now I've gotten to a point where I'm working out 3 or 4 days a week because on
That's
certain
good.
days there's no reason I should not work out, and
Mm.
you have to set those standards because that's fully in your control of what you can do.
Mm. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And I think, like you said, it's that, setting that kind of note that you're going to work out. And, like you said, some days there's no excuse. And I think when you get into that routine of doing it, like, I think, like you said, anything that you start doing that's new is, can be difficult. And, especially working out, if people, haven't worked out for a while or if they're new to it, it is difficult, isn't it? Whatever workout you do, whether that's running or lifting weights or,
Mhm.
press ups. And I think once you kind of go through those barriers and go through those motions, you kind of just, I do it throughout the week as well. And you just kind of get into the flow of doing it. But those initial first steps are like really hard. And I think you benefit from, doing that in the long run over
Mhm.
time.
Yeah, definitely. And so if I was listening to an audiobook, I've definitely learned that I'm not a book reader. I've tried that. I can't make it through multiple pages in a book. It's so hard. But I can do audiobooks, and that's
Mm.
something that I've really learned to appreciate. And there was one audiobook that I was listening to, and it was called Small Moves, Big Change, where she was talking about how to make, habits, new habits. And like, this is the best time really for us to make new habits because we have the time to make those
Mm.
habits. And, it was really, for me, it really showed me, you know, our brains really try to run subconsciously. And
Mm.
a lot of times these bad behaviors or behaviors that we don't want to keep manifesting, we keep doing because it's already on a subconscious autopilot. And the book was just helping to show that we can do the opposite, and we can break those bad habits, but at the same time, we can make new habits to replace them. It's like a
Mm.
toddler. You can't just take what the toddler has and expect it not to cry.
Mm.
You have to swap out what the toddler has. If he's playing with something he shouldn't, or like like a glass figure or something, and swap it out for another something else that's beneficial
Yeah.
for it, that it likes, and the child is going to stay happy. And that's the same way our brains work. It's like
Mm,
you can't just try and break a habit and leave that void without filling that void with something good or something that you
mm,
want to do.
mm. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that's a really good point. I think like you said, I've seen that when I've worked in restaurants and hotels in the past, and people, got their kid, and they'll give their kid. Can I use for example? They'll give their kid like I don't know, like they'll give the kid the phone, and then they then take the phone away, and the kid's kicking off and crying, and it's like you've just kind of opened up the hornet's nest, giving them the phone
Hmm.
because they're just they become addicted, and then if you try giving them a book, they're like, I don't want to read the book, I want to play Sonic or whatever on the phone. And
Yeah.
like it's just that replacement, isn't it, for something else, and noticing the benefits, from that. And I I did that with video games. I used to play video games quite a bit, and I just kind of stopped doing it during the week, and then just do it a bit of the weekend. And I think sometimes when you do that, I mean, for me, you appreciate it more,
Hmm.
and you don't lose that momentum in between.
Exactly. I think it's partially because you're already started the process of subconsciously telling yourself it's only allowed on certain days. It's like when you're hungry. It's like a person that eats all day and then just to eat, and then a person who eats at their allotted meal times and maybe their snacks. They tend to
Mm,
appreciate that more because they're looking forward to it. They've already, we're a pain versus reward. That's the way we're
mm,
wired.
mm,
And we're either, if we're not getting pain, we want reward. So if we're able to say, I'm going to endure this pain of not eating this snack or this or picking at my lunch right now because I
mm,
want to enjoy it all at one shot later, if we feel like that reward is worth it, then we're going to go ahead and endure that little bit of pain of not eating at that second or a little
mm,
earlier.
mm. Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I think like a lot of people, in that loop, aren't they? And like, how would you, what would you kind of like recommend or suggest, for people who are kind of in that kind of that loop of that cycle of doing that, like probably eating unhealthily, when they probably shouldn't be, these kind of bad habits. How would you kind of like say that, or like how would you recommend that they address them? Like what would you say that is a good approach to it?
Don't, I would say don't try and change all of them at one shot.
Mm,
Yeah, because we have a finite amount of willpower. It's almost like willpower is almost like energy. You sleep X amount of time, you could only run so many hours on so much sleep. It's the same thing with our willpower. So the more things you try and change at one shot, the more thin you're spreading yourself or the willpower that you have across those different things, which means that it's going to start like a domino toppling down. So I would suggest changing or making a list of two things maybe that you want to change, and then stick to that for anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks. Um, and one thing that that book taught me of small move, big change was to identify patterns in your life that help synchronize what goals that you want to do. So, for
mm,
instance, for me, when I walk in, I know like I wanted to work out 3 days a week. I hadn't coming off of the stint of not working out or working out like one day a week randomly for 4 to 6 weeks. I wanted to do 3 or 4 weeks consistently. And the book said find something that you do every day on the day that you want to, whatever goal or habit you're trying to create, and link it mentally to that. So for me, it was as soon as I put my keys down when I got in from work, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, that meant I had to go automatically and get changed. No ands, ifs, or buts. Get changed for my workout.
mm,
I've started it. The first 2 weeks was kind of difficult. I'm on week 4. This week was so subconscious for me at this point where it's like I'm not even like and ifing or butting. And it's like if I knew like I was gonna wait for one of my buddies to do a workout with him over video chat, I knew that I was gonna break my habit if I went in earlier. Like if I went into my house without him being
mm,
ready. So I didn't even go into the house yet. So it's just finding that one or two things and then trying to cue them up with something else that's going to remind you subconsciously to go ahead and do that action you want to do positive.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's it. And I think like it's those kind of little cues, isn't it? Like you said, the keys, or putting. Some people said to me as well, put your gym stuff in your car or take it with you so it's already there, so you haven't kind of got
Hmm.
an excuse to go in the house and sit down or XYZ, because you've kind of done it already. And it's like,
Hmm.
and like you said, I think that's a really good point you mentioned. To kind of start kind of small, don't have a lot of a big long list where to do everything all at once. And
Hmm.
I've definitely, I think, kind of learned that with goal setting. Like I'll write down a long list of things, and when you look at it, you're like, I'm going to do all this, and then you're like, okay, then you end up doing like two of them, or like one, and
Hmm.
then, but like I said, that's something, that's kind of like an ongoing process, that I'm working on as well. And I think like it's interesting, isn't it, how we can kind of do that. We can kind of put a lot of expectations on ourselves and pressure on ourselves to do, XYZ amount of things. But like you said, it's just those small kind of things where you might just pick three things to do, and then when you've
Yeah.
done that.
No, and absolutely, I'm like the king of setting huge bars, high expectations. I'm like, I'll make the list and I'll be like, I'm gonna get done every single thing on this list. I'm gonna change every one of those habits or implement every one of those new habits, and then I'll do two or three like you said, and then I'm like, I'm mentally and emotionally exhausted, and I'm like, how come I
Yeah.
can't finish this? Like this makes no
Yeah.
sense, and I'm like, I'm just learning. We have a very limited amount of willpower, a little limited amount of self control, and we just
Mm,
overextend ourselves. Same thing like time. When
mm,
we before the podcast, we were talking about overbooking ourselves.
yeah.
We don't mean to do it, or sometimes we do, and we're like, I think I have enough time. I can squeeze this, and this in, and then you find yourself pulling your hair out trying to get it all done. Because stuff is just back to back, or now stuff is overlapping each other, and mm, there's no real benefit of that, and
Mm,
that's something I was thinking. I was talking to somebody on Twitter, and I was like, I'm learning. I rather go narrow and deep, and just like focus on that very narrow subject or that very narrow skill or trait I'm trying to get or acquire for anywhere 4, 6, 8 weeks, learn about it, and then go to something else, or move on to another goal, instead of trying to do 5, 6, 7 goals at the same time, or go, in other words, go wide and then not really accomplish anything.
mm, yeah. No, that's exactly it. And I think, like you mentioned as well, like go ham for ham, kind of like on like a set one or two things, and put your focus into that, isn't it? And you kind of probably more likely to get it done. But I think like that's kind of like like people who are entrepreneurs and they kind of build things. You think like I think that's kind of like why like say being self-employed or doing kind of similar things to what we're doing. It's kind of difficult because there's so many different things within that involved. And
Hmm.
I think if you're not paying somebody to help you do X, Y, Z, like I said, it can be difficult because we're kind of in our mindset and that kind of willpower and how we work. We're kind of like limited in some way to how much with time as well to what we can do. And I think
Hmm.
would you say like it comes down to like a lot of mindset, and you kind of have to like surround yourself with good role models and people who are doing similar things. Like what works for you? Do you have like role models and mentors as well?
I think mindset is important. I think self-awareness is extremely important. Role models, mentor, like the last 4 years of my life that I've thrived mainly from listening to outside noise or outside opinions and thoughts. And this last 3 months, I've really taken a step back and like started listening internally. Like
Mm,
I know, like I'll listen to things that tell me what I need to hear or what I need to do. And Fearless Motivation, Motiversity, Mulligan Brothers on YouTube, stuff like that.
Yeah,
This
they
stuff
agree.
usually is pretty good. It's pretty inspirational, for lack of a better word, but it just kind of gets you in that mindset of,
Mm,
okay, I might not feel like doing it, but I'm going to do it anyway. But
mm,
then there needs to be a greater amount of self-awareness, so that way you make sure that you're taking steps in a direction that is actually in line with what you believe, what you feel, what actually is you, not just you're doing it because that's what you're told to do, or that's what you set your go to. Reminds me when I was on to Gary Vee, I was selling health insurance. I hated it, but I said I was going to be there a year. After, a lot of reflection, I'm like, I'm sitting here and doing something that I don't like when I can be doing something else that I do enjoy a little bit more, pays me
mm,
a little bit more or a little more regularly. And I had to make the decision at that point, from my self-aware standpoint, regardless of who was going to look at me one way or another in the office for leaving a year early when I said I was going to be or there for a while, that it was in my best interest to go ahead and make that change, career change. And and I don't regret making that change because it's allowed me to have a lot
mm,
more peace internally. So definitely, that's something I think you need. It's a lot of mindset, but don't allow your mindset to just become ego of what you are going to be or what you want to do. You have to be in tune with who you are as an individual.
mm. Yeah, no, that's a really great point. I think, and like kudos to you for like listening to yourself as well and channeling into what's right for you and the actions you need to take. And I think like, excuse me, I think like you said as well, like a lot of people get caught in that outside noise as you described, and it can be tricky to to break away from that because I think a lot of the time some people growing up or a lot of us were kind of focused on what people think, what people decide for us to do, the actions that we take and how's that going to be perceived and all of this. It's that ego thing as well, like which is massive because I I think like you said, a lot of it comes down to being humble as well, doesn't it? And
Mhm.
not, like people could be in something that fuels their ego, but that might not be making them happy. And if they like do something that they enjoy, which might be creating videos about, I don't know, making, do you know what I mean? Like doing something that's creative, making something which doesn't fuel their
Mhm.
ego as much. And it's that leap, isn't it? Like, are you going to jump from a job doing XYZ, making however much, to doing something that you really enjoy, but how that's going to be perceived? And I think it's that big kind of gap, isn't it, where we're all kind of trying to find our way
Mhm.
as well amongst that. But I think that's kind of like what goes on for a lot of us.
Yeah. I agree. Um, Especially with like that last point where we're taking all this external noise coming at us, and we're trying to find our way in life at the same time. You
Mm,
know, um, the way I've learned and I forget, and then I remember, and then I forget, is like life. It's not a roadmap. It's a
mm,
journey. If you set a business plan or a life plan of in 3 years I want to accomplish this, 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 and this, it's okay to make adjustments as you see fit. And not quitting just because it was tough and it was hard, but because you honestly took a step back, really pondered about it, and said, this is not a career that I want to be in anymore. I don't want to be in filmography, or I don't want to be in, an artist. And then I rather be spending my time going ahead and, rescuing animals, or something else. I don't know, baking
mm,
cakes. And then the way that it's not just you taking, I'm just looking for a way out of this because it's
mm,
tough, is
mm,
when you're actually able
mm,
to sit down and calculate and say, well, I want to stop doing this career. I would prefer to do this career. And then you're able to go and say, well, to do this, I need to do this.
mm,
You have to make that
mm,
transition over. It's not just always just stop overnight.
mm,
I'm a fan of taking risks in life and doing stuff, that
mm.
nobody would see you doing, but I'm a fan of taking calculated risk. you take the time, you calculate the cost, how it kind of negatively affect you, if it's your livelihood, how to switch over your means of income from the
mm,
career you have to what you want to be doing. And
mm,
even if it takes a year or it takes 5 years, ultimately that's how you know that's really what you need to be doing, or that's what you should be doing.
mm. Yeah, no, I totally agree, and it makes me think, about my current situation, and like, I'm doing podcasting, trying to build my coaching, and like I love doing podcasts. I love doing this. I love, I do it to provide value to other people, and I love connecting with people like yourself as well. And
Mhm.
I'm kind of in the boat where I'm doing this, and I'm like, do I focus on this? Keep focusing on this. I've got a few opportunities where I can go into like a few jobs. Um, one's like a delivery kind of driver, working for like a UPS kind of company.
Mhm.
But then I'm like, in my mind, and right now, I'm like, do I do that alongside doing this, or should I just keep on kind of doing this, even though I don't want a career in that? Is it going to make me happy? The happiness kind of is in this, do you know what I mean? And I think like
Mhm.
we kind of have that yo-yo inside sometimes, and it's like you're doing X, Y, Z, but you're like, do I jump into this? And I
Yeah.
think, like you said, there's those calculated risks, and kind of having that balance is kind of key, isn't it?
Mhm. Yeah, and having that balance, and we don't know. I think what is such a stressor is because we don't know if you go ahead and you take podcasting full time and trying to and do that full time in your coaching, you might not be able to, you don't know what's going to happen in a year. It might take off in a year. It might take off in 6 months. It might take three
Yeah,
years. Then you never have to do something else that you don't really enjoy doing for
yeah,
to
yeah.
maintain your livelihood. And then you don't know if you're going to go ahead and do this, like UPS or postal delivery service, do that for a year and love it, or do that for a year and hate it.
Mm,
And I think that's where perspective really helps, because I can go ahead and start something for 6 months, a year, and say, hey, I don't really like this. And
mm,
then, jump out of it, or be like, hey, I need to live. So I'm going to do this right now. Like, I'm
mm.
working in a doctor's office. It's not my preferred. I never wanted to go back working in a doctor's office because
Yeah,
the health system is not a fun place to work, but I need to pay my bills. But in the
yeah, yeah.
meantime, I'm working on the
Mm,
side, my coaching, my building up my knowledge on health and
mm,
wellness, so that way, hopefully, in the next 2 3 years, I'm able to gradually make that transition, instead of working in a doctor's office, working in a gym, started working in a gym, having my own clients, instead of having my own
mm,
clients, having my own gym.
mm, mm,
The macro, like, that's a big in the future,
mm,
but like, you don't know. So having that awareness to, I, I don't know what the future holds, but being willing to take that calculated risk,
mm,
and then being humble enough to shift gears or change directions if you need to. I think
mm,
that's huge. I've experienced it personally myself, and I'm glad
mm.
that I've been able to do that. And it's something that I always want to make sure I'm open to whenever an opportunity presents and comes my way.
Yeah. No, I really like that, and I think like it's like you said, you're able to you know be self-aware and be tuned into like what you're doing, and say to yourself, this isn't working out. I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and change it up again. And I think like that's definitely a very good skill to have. And I think a lot of the time people get stuck and they're not doing that, and they get overwhelmed because
Mhm.
it's scary to jump into the unknown. But it's much more scarier, I think, to stay in that thing and not jump into the unknown. And I noticed that when I was going to join the military and join the army when I was 18, and I got so far into the training, and I was like, I don't want to do this. Like something just didn't feel right. So I changed my mind and came out of it. But I think like some people can do that, and some people don't do that. But I think it's so important to do that. If that makes sense,
Mhm.
because that I think, like you said, it's all relevant experience, isn't it? If
Yeah.
something doesn't work out for you, you've taken experience from that, and you can do something else. And I think it's great that you said as well. that kind of macro side of it. You know, you're doing XYZ for a year, you know, or 2 years, but you are doing something on the side alongside that, and you're not losing track of that. You keep, you know, that's funneling this here, and you're doing XYZ there. And I think that's kind of you know, and I talk about it quite a lot as well. You know, people, if they're not happy doing something, you know, do XYZ on the side.
Mhm.
But I think for me personally, I think my fear as a person is fear of getting stuck. You know, that I don't want to settle and get stuck in someone I don't like, and then
Mhm.
do you know what I mean? So that's kind of like probably my own thing. But like you said, through having that macro, doing X, Y, Z, and something else.
Yeah. It it kind of like when I was sitting talking with my aunt yesterday, and the time before, she was talking about how she got into housing and she was stuck in this house for 5 years and that house for seven. And this house was great and that house was terrible. And this one was a money pit and this one was terrible location. And then, all the domino effect of, well, I had to work 3 jobs because of this and blah, blah, blah.
Mm,
And that's where I see, like, okay, I don't want to make just a decision, like a split second decision on a whim, and then get stuck in a situation like one of the housing situations she was
mm,
in. She was like, it was an emergency type situation where I was at
yeah,
a place and I had to just get out and go somewhere else because circumstance changed. And I'm like, okay, that was an emergency, but like at the same time, that's one thing, but I don't want to do that, cause that for myself. And I think that's like for me, that's what scares me. I don't want
mm,
to go ahead and make a decision and then, get stuck in a situation for 5 years and then be like, that was 5 years lost or in this environment or this scenario I don't like.
yeah,
But then when I look at it and she's telling me stories, and then that's just one small segment of her 65 years of life,
mm,
I'm like, there is the potential of making a bad decision, but if you get stuck, for me, I'm like a perfectionist and a planner and a strategist. So like I can sit here forever strategizing how's the best way to go about doing something because I don't want to be in that situation. I want everything like straight lines, and
yeah,
that's not
yeah,
how life is. And then, but when I see that, this is the 5 years that she had at this one location that she didn't like, just a small smidget, and this is her life.
mm,
I'm like, well, if I do make a bad decision or miscalculation or something doesn't go exactly as planned because COVID-19, global pandemic, or something like that, well, that's just going to be a small portion of my life.
mm,
And I'd rather at least have the opportunity to say that I've tried that. I know that doesn't work for me. I don't like that.
mm,
Or, that's going to give me the skills or training that I need to accomplish something else further down the road. Maybe not now, but 10 years down the road, you don't know where you're going to be at. You don't know what
mm,
life is going to look like.
yeah. No, that's really powerful. That's really powerful, and I think it does make you, like I said, put things massively into perspective when you say like, you know, that's just like a small smidgen of, you know, your life. You know, you're doing, you know, you're in that situation, and that yeah, you know, you've got all this time here, and like you know how you can make certain decisions, and then like you said, that kind of fear of getting trapped into a situation. And I think like sometimes that does happen to people. It's just kind of like you might take one leap, one step, and then this happens, and then you're in
Mhm.
XYZ situation. And I've spoken to a few people who are, you know, they're stuck in different countries because they went to visit their family and they can't come back because of COVID. And it's like a similar example, isn't it, to the extreme? And
Mhm.
some things I think like, you know, what I'm learning as a person as well is like, you know, reacting and responding. It's like, you know, how are you going to respond to the situation over like reacting, isn't it?
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Um, and like you said, that's a little bit of an extreme, and like nobody could have predicted, there was going to be a global pandemic that was going to stop them and lock them down where they're at. But then at the same time, it also creates, well, for me, generally, when I'm when I'm self-aware enough and I'm like in generally my right mind, I'll be like, okay, well, I wasn't anticipating this.
Mm,
After the turmoil and the aftermath of coming to the realization of that, and I'm like, what can I do?
mm,
And then you got to focus and shift gears to what is in your control,
mm,
and then just make the adjustments at that point. Maybe you might get
mm,
stuck at a job because you signed a contract for 3 years, and it turns out that you hate that job because you don't like the work. Well, then what can you do, or what can I do, so that way, as soon as I get out that job, I don't have to even think about renewing that contract.
mm,
What do I have to do to try and make my environment a little bit more palatable, so that way I'm
mm,
able to, instead of feeling like I want to die every day I go to work, I at least can bear the load of going to a job that I don't like.
mm. Yeah, no, no, I completely agree with you. And I think, like you said as well, it's having that mindset where you can look at creating something else, alongside what you're doing if you don't enjoy it, and so you don't have to renew that contract or go back into that situation. And I
Mhm.
think I think this whole scenario with COVID, like, it's definitely, I've definitely learned a lot about patience and process and time, because I like to hit the ground running with things. That's not how life works.
Mhm.
So I think that, this period of time is definitely very self-reflective. It's definitely kind of an opportunity, like I said, for people to really think about where they're at and what they want to do. And I think there's definitely a silver lining to it. And like you said, looking at the things, that you want to do.
Yeah, definitely. And I think honestly, and as hard as it can be, whether with COVID, self isolation, limited contact, that's all important to our happiness, our positivity.
Mm,
But I think surrounding ourselves, whether it be through entertainment, or just working on changing our perspective towards
mm,
one of more looking for the upside of things. One of positivity definitely is something that um, can change the way that you feel about things. Like at
mm,
work, even when we have like an overload of patients, or we have um w- there was a former employee who's not longer there with me, but it was
yeah,
just making all this extra work for us because she was not capable of doing the job correctly.
yeah,
As
yeah.
much as that was an issue, there's always a flip side. There's always a funny spin. There's always something that you can make laughter about, which is
Mm,
definitely you can always turn it something negative, positive, but
mm,
you have to be looking for it. Positivity isn't just sitting there like a diamond, along the road. You
yeah.
got to dig for it a little bit sometimes. And that takes a little bit
Mm,
of work, but it's so much more worth it because you're going to be a happier person, and
mm,
you might be in this environment that's crappy for you, but it's going to make it a little bit more lighter
mm.
for you too.
You, yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Like, you have to kind of put in that work and, have that choice of, looking at, the positive side to things. I think it's like, being like having that perspective and being grateful, isn't it, as well, for your job and where you're at and your health. And, sometimes, there's always going to be that yin and yang, but, you
Hmm.
have a choice, like you said, of what you want to focus on. And I think if you're focusing on, being grateful and, looking at the flip side of things, it's really, a better way to be, isn't it? Like you said, you might have a bad day at work or something might happen, but
Hmm.
like I said, there's always that you can flip that if you choose to, and you laugh about it and you move on from it.
Yeah, and I've heard, I'm sure you've heard that there's somebody who has things worse than you do. Like someone's like kind of scolding you for being pessimistic or down in the moment, and they're like, "Ah, somebody has it worse." Well, I started thinking, not somebody has it worse than me, because it can be a real problem. It can be a real
Mm,
issue. It can be
mm,
severe pain or something like that. But so I started looking at it internally. Well, it can be worse than what I have it right now.
mm,
Yeah, I'm having this issue at work, but it can be worse. I can have no work. Or it can be worse. I can have issues with this person, and this person, or I cannot get along with 5 people instead of just one.
mm,
Your current situation can always be worse than what it actually is. And I've seen stuff, where it was bad in my even in my life, and it takes a
mm,
turn for the worse, and you're like, oh, I wish I would have appreciated when I had it a little bit better, because now it's more trialsome for me.
mm. Yeah, no, I completely, I agree, and I think like, but I think like in those situations where sometimes things might be bad or uncomfortable or difficult or challenging, I think there is so much growth that kind of takes place within that, if that makes sense. And
Hmm.
I think sometimes we don't always see that until we kind of come through it or over time, and we reflect back. And you can always like reflect back to situations that weren't very good, or struggles, and you can then look at kind of apply it to this current situation, can't you, or whatever situation is challenging you, and kind of think, oh well, I dealt with XYZ back then. You know,
Hmm.
this right now isn't so bad. Do you
Exactly.
ever like think that helps sometimes? Like if you've ever been in a situation like that?
Yeah. I know whenever I hit like a moment that's a low for me, or it's like really, really like mentally, emotionally draining for me, and I'm like, I don't know, like if I can solve this problem, or if I'll get through this problem, or if I'm gonna come out on the other end, and then I can just, it gives you that hindsight to say, oh, this is bad. This might be the worst thing that it maybe even be worse than what I thought was the worst before, but I've still come through it. And like,
Mm,
and sometimes if and it's hard to do it in the moment, but
yeah.
occasionally if you have that little window of clarity, you can look at and see like what helped you get through it before, and you might be able
Mm,
to extract something from the past to help carry you through at this moment.
mm, yeah. Yeah. No, definitely, definitely. And I think with that as well, you can then. I think when you go through certain things, it gives you a lot of empathy. You have a lot of empathy and a different perspective, and you can see or feel. I think if someone else is going through that, and you can help them or kind of like mentor them in some way. So there is that
Mhm,
flip side to it in some crazy way. Like I think like it's how you kind of use that, isn't it? Some people have things
mhm,
happen and they become a victim, and they're like, oh,
mhm,
this X Y Z because of this, and it's like, well, it's that kind of like you said, that flip. How are you going to flip that?
mhm. And I forget which audiobook I was listening to, but it had mentioned that, you know, looking at things from that victim type of mentality, as comforting as it is, it's really just a pacifier
Mm,
that prevents you from taking responsibility, or taking things back in your control. And I feel
mm,
like a lot of times, when you're a victim of something, whether it be a robbery, and myself or my stepfather, or any kind, we're all
yeah.
victims of COVID-19 to an extent. When we put ourselves in that frame of mind, it's just taking away all the power that we have. We're giving all of our power away, when we really have so much more power and control over our circumstances than we realize.
Mm,
So
yeah. No.
and I've said it before on different podcasts. When I started going to therapy, when I first came out from living with my stepfather, that was
Yeah.
something I made clear, that I was a victim to my therapist. That I was my mindset that I wanted to foster, even though at the moment I didn't have it. But the way I wanted to look at life was, I was a victim in the past, but I'm not a victim right now. That
Mm,
I'm either like I'm not a survivor. Like I'm a warrior. I'm
mm,
victorious. I'm a
mm,
victor. Like I try to relate myself, my identity, to those types of adjectives,
mm,
because those are all things that puts power back in your pocket.
mm,
It helps instill that ability to, like, yeah, I can do this.
mm,
I control more than I think.
yeah. No, that's definitely key, isn't it? Like you said, and I appreciate you talking about that. And I think like it's those. It just shows you how powerful those kind of objectives are and those words are.
Hmm.
Of what that kind of we put with our self image or our kind of place,
Mhm.
and like a warrior, and these kind of things that they're going to drive you forward rather than backwards, or for staying somewhere, isn't it? And I think it's so key to do that, and be able to not be a victim, and to recognize where you're at, and to say, that's me then, and that isn't me now.
Exactly. It, and looking at things from a objective point of view, something that I did the other day, self-reflectively on it, was like I looked at my name, like I wrote, who is iKing, and then I just went ahead and was like, just who is iKing, and then first thought that comes to my mind, and then again, who is iKing? I think I posted something like that I see on TikTok. Do it 7 times. By the time you get to the seventh time, you're pretty much going to unravel what the true answer is. And then I took that answer. I didn't like the answer. I then started again and started.
Mm,
Why is iKing afraid of this? Why does iKing not want to do this? And then started again, try and get to a deeper awareness of myself. And
mm,
it just, again, a lot of it comes down to that self-awareness and that identity
mm,
that you identify, and then sometimes taking a step back and looking at it from an objective third, like almost third person point of view,
mm,
objectifying yourself, who is I King, or who is Sam, who is Adam, and then just
mm,
putting them out on paper, and then looking at it, and then it gives you some, for me it gives me some clarity.
mm. Yeah, no, that's a really good way of looking at it, isn't it? And applying it, because I think, like, we can get so caught, not caught up in our head, but we kind of, people, just like I said, the third person perspective. People sometimes point things out, don't they? And they see things that we kind of don't. We see things in other people that they don't. I think that's
Hmm.
a great way to do it, where we can kind of be, what's the word, like, vulnerable in some way, put ourselves in that vulnerable place, and be honest
Hmm.
with ourselves, and say, okay, well, who am I? And just kind of draw back those layers, isn't it? And kind of
Hmm.
see it.
For what it
Like,
is.
yeah, like, did I did I did I ever tell you about what happened to me, or like, my bio? Because I had
No.
PTSD and anxiety from an accident I had, where I fell through a roof on a skylight
Oh boy.
when I was 13 years old. So I kind of went through PTSD, anxiety, and depression, and things at school as well, and that went on for a while. So I'm okay now. I don't have any anxiety or depression, or anything like that. I had therapy back then, but like you said, it's, I look sometimes, when I was going through that, would look at it from that third person perspective. Like you said, I would have to write things down, and you kind
Hmm.
of, that's kind of like those kind of baby steps in some sense, isn't it, as well, by taking that effort and action to deal with it and look at it from that other angle. And it really does kind of, come together when you think of it, that we are in full control of our lives, and we have to make that decision, don't we, what it is that we want to do,
Yeah,
with a little bit of
definitely.
help alongside it.
Hmm. And well, I'm glad that you're doing a lot better now from that. That can
Oh,
definitely leave an impact.
yeah,
Um,
no, appreciate it.
and and you're totally right. We have a long life. It doesn't mean we need to solve all of our issues, all of our problems, all of our mental
Yeah,
health concerns in one sitting, in one day, or 1 year.
yeah,
It's just getting better acquainted with understanding ourselves each day, or each week, or each month, depending on what we're capable of doing. And
mm,
sometimes using that third person point of view, whether it actually be another person that we trust, or sometimes just objectively looking at ourselves, so that we can actually take under, if we're making excuses, or if we're making things harder than they need to be,
mm,
sometimes we might not want to hear it from somebody else,
mm,
and we would have to just see it for look objectively looking at ourselves, and that's really hard to do, especially again if we have ego, we have a hard
yeah,
ego, or high ego. So it's definitely something, uh, putting it on paper, for me it clears my head.
mm.
I don't like writing, so I find it difficult to do it as often as I really should, but when I do get to it and I do it, I definitely I definitely have a lot more clarity about myself as a person than
Yeah.
when I don't.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And just by writing it out or doing whatever works for you, isn't it? And then it's difficult, but you feel better afterwards. And I find out, well, like sometimes when I've got things to do, if I do some of the small things that I need to do, I feel better because I've done it. Even though there might be small things, it's like a weight off that kind of load of the things might need to do in the day. Um, no, no, definitely. And like as well, do you like you said you don't read? But what audiobooks would you recommend, or any kind of audiobooks you like, or books even?
So, the ones right now that I like a lot. Let me go back to my
Nice one.
library app here. Home. So the one book, um, Small Move, Big Change by Carol Arnold. That one really is instrumental in explaining it. It's kind of there's a lot of fluff in it. So if you can get through the fluff, she has a lot
what,
of
what do you mean by that?
like there's a lot of extra words and stories and
Yeah,
examples and stuff that really well, at least for me, it was just unnecessary and repetitive
yeah,
just to fill the book. But if you can get through that, there's a lot of good takeaways of how to build new habits into your life. That like I'm a huge fan of efficiency and autopilot. I like stuff running on autopilot because it takes less energy for me. I have ADHD, so my mind is always racing all the time.
yeah,
So
yeah.
if I have to make one more decision, I'm already running through parameters and like
How to
risk
do it?
management to or is now a better time, later better time, and that just gets exhausting and draining for me.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
if I can have something on autopilot, like for instance working out, instead of having to decide should I take a nap or should I work out, and just having it on autopilot, put my keys down, I'm going straight, grab some pre-workout, I'm going
yeah.
straight and changing up to my workout clothes. I don't have to think about that. It's
Mm,
autopilot. So this book definitely teaches how to get those habits started so that you don't
yeah,
have to
yeah.
think about it. And then the other book that I really really liked, it was called The Art of Learning and Self-Development by Jim Stovall.
Mm,
His PhD, he goes into how the brain works and how we actually learn as human beings, and how can we build upon ourselves. Those are two
mm,
books that I found. The second one was a little bit more on the sciencey type of side, but nobody's going to do that kind of learning for us. So like I rather understand how the brain works than depend on somebody else to tell me how that brain works,
mm,
because I get to take things again back into my control, and
mm,
now I don't have to depend on somebody else to teach me how to learn. I know how my individual brain
mm,
works.
mm. No, they sound like really, really great books, and I appreciate you sharing them on the podcast. And I think, like you said as well, it's so important. You know, everyone's different, but I think, like I said, it's so important to know how you work as a person, how your mind
Mhm.
works, how your body works, and not to just chuck that into the hands of someone else and telling you how things are working. You kind of you want to work out to experience what it's like to work out. You don't want someone to tell you.
Mhm.
If somebody told you, oh, well, you lift the weight and it feels like this, you're like, well, I want to do it and find out. And
Yeah.
like, yeah, no, it's so important. But no, I think they sound like really great books, and I'll have to check them out. And as well, like to kind of like round up, like what would you say to kind of people who kind of don't really know what they want to do in life, or might be
Mhm.
going through struggles? Like, what would you kind of like recommend? Kind of like starting out, to find out that it is that they want to do.
If somebody doesn't know what they want to do in life, well, it depends on how old are you.
Yeah.
Because if you're 18 and you don't know what you want to do in life, I feel like you still have a lot of time. You know,
Mm,
you, and then second, I'd say, and I guess it really doesn't matter how old you are unless you're like 70 years old.
yeah.
But like, just start doing something. If there's something that you're
Mm,
interested in, do a little research, figure out what's involved with it,
mm,
and then go ahead and try it. And if you don't like it, then be adaptable. Be ready to shift gears into something else. And understand, that you don't really need to know exactly what you want to do, because life, again, it's a journey. You need to appreciate the experience of life,
Mm.
because you know the life that you're not going to be able to live the day that you're living today again. You're not going to live the day you lived yesterday again. Never going to be. You might live something similar, but you're not going to live two exactly identical days.
Mm.
So I prefer, like, over the last 4 years, I've done so much stuff that I feel like it's been 10 years, and
Yeah.
that's fine. Because as you get older, the perception of time only moves faster. So the more stuff you're able to do, either whether young, or the more stuff you're able to do starting right now, the sooner you're going to be able to find out what you don't like and what doesn't work.
Mm. Yeah. No, that's really powerful, and I totally agree with you. And I think like it's so important, isn't it? And what you said, like like you might be 18 or 20, or younger, and you don't know what you want to do, but just like you said, just do something to find out and gain that experience. And even if someone's older, they might not have the same energy levels, but still, you still got time. And I hear a lot
Mhm.
of people that will say, I'm just starting out. Might be 40 years old or whatever, and they're saying I'm just starting out, and it's it's so pointless, isn't it? It's kind of how you piece it together. Like you said, you still have time.
Mhm. You do, unless your time only runs out once you're on your deathbed.
Mm,
That's the way I see it. If you're on your deathbed, then
mm,
you run out of time. But until
mm,
then, as long as you're able to move and you're not in a vegetative state,
mm,
then you have time to do whatever it is that you want to do. This will
mm,
inspire people. If it's work with animals, if it's baking, if it having your own restaurant, I don't care what it is.
mm,
You just got to start, really.
mm.
You got to take that leap, even though you're scared, and you got to start. Because I know there are a lot of people who know what they want to do, but they're so afraid because it's either so left field, or they're afraid to fail at something that's so important and precious to them, that they
Mm.
really treasure, that they're not going to do nothing. And that's really, honestly, what I don't want everybody to go through. That's something
Yeah,
that I'm
yeah,
afraid, because then when we hear it all the time, well, regret's terrible.
yeah.
Regret weighs pounds. Doing a sacrifice now, it weighs ounces.
Mm,
And that I don't want people having that regret,
mm,
because when they're 65 and they can't do nothing, or 70, and they got a pacemaker in their heart, now they're limited in what they can do.
mm, mm.
Doesn't mean they can't do nothing, but they're limited much more.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really powerful point, and I totally agree with you. And I think like you don't. I think as a person, you don't want that regret in your life because, like you said, it weighs on you.
Hmm.
I mean, the only kind of regret I have is selling my Pokemon cards. Um, I, and that's a heavy regret, in itself, because I, they're worth thousands now, and
Hmm.
I had all of them, and I'm like, man,
Yeah.
but but I mean, I'm just like making a joke with that, but
In hindsight, though,
regrets, yeah, in
you're
hindsight,
learning hindsight. 20 years from now, when the Pokemon starts
yeah,
again or drops, and you buy it all up, you can, like,
yeah,
you'll be able to know
yeah.
when the next opportunity is.
That's it. But no, like, it's not good to have regrets. And I think we just need to just take that leap of faith and try things like you said. And, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. It's okay. Do something else and just keep on doing until it kind of clicks. And I think some people might be doing something that they really enjoy and they might just think, oh, I'm going to do something else now. That's okay, isn't it? Um, but yeah, but I mean, where can people find you on social media, son? And like your website and that kind of stuff?
So my social media, Instagram is gonna be Rise Body Soul. My website's risebodysoul.com, and my Twitter is gonna be iKing Davis.
Mm,
Um, and pretty much, yeah, that's where you can find me on everything. On my Instagram profile, I do have a number that you can text me. that would be the quickest way you can reach me, instead of direct messaging, because it doesn't always I don't always get a notification, but I'll always get a notification from the text.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I see US number, right? So you have to put the
The I guess the one
yeah. I think it's for
or
the U. For it depends on where you are. I think in the UK it's +1. Yeah.
plus one, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. But no, Sam, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast, and I'm really, really grateful to connect to you, and I'm really grateful, for your time, and
Yes.
I've had a really great time, and I really appreciate it.
Yes, and I'm
Right?
fine. I'm glad that we've been able to finally get the time together,
Yeah,
think up our schedules enough so we can do this, because it was
yeah,
good.
yeah. No, I agree. It's been great, and I'm really grateful, and I wish you all the best in what you're doing, and yeah, it's been really inspiring talking to you.
Yep, same.
No, but
All right,
I wish you all the best, and have a great day.
all right, you too.
Cheers, man. Cheers, guys.